with any form of money, whether it's fiat, US dollars, whatever, there has to be a token distribution or a coin distribution model. Those newly created money have to be put into circulation somehow. Somebody has to get them in their hands before other people. The token distribution model is critical. So what Hex did in its token distribution model is the inverse of what Bitcoin did in its token distribution model. What Bitcoin did was say, we'll create the tokens slowly over time and we'll reward those that secure the network and build the network by giving them the tokens so that they will be the ones that distribute them out into circulation. So they receive the tokens and then they sell them at whatever time they want to the next person, and that's how they get out into the circulation. But the total supply won't be created to the end. And so what they were assuming was that as the tokens were being distributed and they halved the fee, they have the reward every 4 years, that the adoption would be happening simultaneously, which would be ramping up the fees as the token creation rewards were going down. The fees would be going up, and the miners would still be incentivized as those two crossed each other and the one became more dominant than the other, that miners would still be equally incentivized as they were in the beginning, because now there would be more adoption. What Hex did is it created all the tokens up front with the lion's share of them being held in the OA. So think of the OA as the token distributor, right? They're still going to be distributing those tokens over time. And as long as the OA acts responsibly, as adoption ramps up and the OA distributes more and more tokens as the price goes up, the price will remain consistent and the adoption will grow, because the inverse model that Bitcoin used failed because people could attack it. But how do you attack this model unless you know who the OA is, or you are the OA, or you somehow gain access to the OA? You can't attack this distribution model.
But what
it's more stable.
But what do you mean the OA will distribute the coins? Right now it's just sitting there, right? What do you see?
Right, and why do you think the OA chooses not to stake? Because for the most part, the OA is not staked, right? The OA is staked. He staked before the big payday for a specific reason, because the speculators were coming in and the speculators were going to take all the rewards without having put in all the time. And the people who had put in all the time to stake up to getting to big payday were going to get cheated out of the rewards by the speculators. So the OA steps in, stakes a huge bunch, and then redistributes those rewards. He takes it right out of the hands of the speculators and he gives it back to the staking class. Nobody could have done that but the OA.
But how did that work? That distribution, how did that work? Was it the longer term stakers got more, or how was that?
No. It means that he's not moving the coins, and because you're mining them by staking, that's a distribution for whoever sticks around.
Still the OA tokens, the OA's tokens will be diluted over time, because he'll just dilute as more is needed into the supply. He'll put them into the supply. Who do you think's providing all the liquidity? The OA is probably providing 50% or greater of the liquidity in the pools. That's how people acquire their tokens, right? They come in, they get USDC, they go to the Uniswap, they trade their USDC for Hex. Where's the Hex come from? Comes from the liquidity provider. Who's the liquidity provider? The OA. But if the OA handles that and manages that liquidity distribution responsibly, what happens to price? You can generally you can create a price chart that just goes up and to the right.
But people themselves that hold Hex, like you and me, are also liquidity providers, right?
Sure. If you choose to be, you can be a liquidity provider and you will get a portion of the fees. And then you may lose your Hex and get USDC, or lose your Hex and get ETH, or lose your ETH and get Hex, or whatever it is that happens in that pool that you're putting liquidity in. You have to take that into consideration. Who can provide the hex liquidity that's needed better than the OA? He has more than he could possibly ever need. He, they, whatever, he, she, they, whoever it is, right? They have more than they could possibly ever need, but they have to responsibly put it into circulation. Well, how do you decide how much to put into circulation? Well, how much do people want to buy? If people want to buy more, you give more. If people want to buy less, you give less. You're responsibly putting it out there into circulation. If people bid the price up too high, he can pull back the liquidity and taper down the price. If people don't bid it up high enough, and I'm just saying that whoever's providing the liquidity can literally kind of, to some degree, control the distribution of the tokens and the price of the token.
It's also a dangerous road, though. The Origin wallet becoming too involved. I would say the less involvement, the better would be my instinct.
Okay, but so the argument is centralized versus decentralized, right?
I hear what you're saying. I'm just saying it could be a slippery slope. I don't know.
I totally agree. It's like you are trusting an entity you can't name, and it's a centralized control, right? This is the reason that people like Man Rand don't want to buy into Hex, because they don't trust.
It's centrally controlled, which goes against everything that crypto stands for. But
except for,
and it's a finished product, so you can.
The only thing that's really being centrally controlled is the token distribution. Which, if you look at Bitcoin, the Bitcoin token distribution model failed because it was decentralized. Some things work better centralized, some things work better decentralized, but you have to have trusted people and trusted parties operating those centralized facilities.
Well, they say that the best system of government is a benevolent dictator.
Exactly. So in the case of the U.S. dollar, let's just take the real U.S. dollar, right? Which really isn't even a U.S. dollar; it's a Federal Reserve debt note, right? Created by a private entity called the Federal Reserve, who has the power to print the tokens, right? They put them into distribution however they want. Where do they go first? They go to all the other bankers' hands. They go to all the rich people's hands first, So that token distribution model, you can see when a nefarious player gets control of the distribution of the token, what the end result is. The rich get richer, the poor get poorer, until the whole thing fucking turns upside down and collapses, right? And Bitcoin tried to decentralize that, and we found what? Well, that doesn't really work any better, because now the miners control it, and it's just a different model, right? And then you can go in and you can disrupt it and break it, and people can take control of different things by taking control of the tokens or taking control of the mining, and now they have control of the distribution. So a centralized authority holding the bulk of the tokens in the beginning of that token distribution is almost essential to its success. What Richard was doing was looking at how everything else had tried, what everybody else had tried, and why they had all failed, and why decentralized and centralized are useful in different roles. And then he took the best of both worlds, and he's so far he's pulling it off, right? Now, who controls that OA? I don't know. Maybe it's a body of people. Maybe they're operating under an agreement of some sort. Maybe they're even operating under some level of code. Who knows? Like, I don't think Richard's dumb enough to put the whole thing in his hands and his hands only, and risk the fact that this whole project would go to shit if he died. That would be stupid. He doesn't want it to die. He wants it to succeed way long past him. So I don't know how he's doing it, but he can't tell us how he's doing it, because if he tells us how he's doing it, it becomes classified as something else, and then they break it in a different way. So you have to trust to some degree that whoever's controlling the token distribution through the keys of the OA is going to do the right thing. And so far, they've shown that's all they're doing is the right thing. Now, why would he, if it is Richard, why would he break his own project? That would be stupid. He would just be like, it's not like he's going to get richer by running off with the money, by rug pulling, right? He's going to get way wealthier by doing the right thing than by rug pulling. But people don't understand it because they live through the central bank model and they see how that's been a disastrous failure. And then they get offered this alternative, which is it's diametrically opposed to opposite of Bitcoin, a completely decentralized model. And then they see how that one kind of gets fucked with because it was supposed to be a peer-to-peer digital cash, right? But you can't use it that way now. Why not? Because they manipulated it. They got on the inside and they manipulated the code, right? Who took the keys to the GitHub from Gavin and Andresen? That was the Bitstream boys. Who the Bitstream boys work for? Same fucking people who own all the central banks. Why did they do that? And what was the first move they did when he let him into the GitHub? They locked him out. But who was Gavin Andresen? He was the person who Satoshi himself gave the keys to the GitHub code to, so that it wouldn't be fucked with. But that's not what happened. But that same debacle can't happen with Hex because nobody knows who the OA is, and the OA is in control of the bulk of the tokens at this point. But I think if you watch the OA addresses, what you will see over time is you'll see that they will slowly dilute to where the OA is holding less and less percentage of the total tokens over time as adoption comes up and more token holders are holding tokens.
When it comes to Paul's, the same entity sacrificed, right? So that entity holds like 95% of Paul's now.
Agreed. And hopefully it's the same kind of a situation where that entity is going to be a benevolent token distribution center or authority until that network grows. Because in the beginning of any network, like what makes a network strong is network effect. What makes network effect is users, right? But you can't get to that point without the token distribution. You have to have your token distributed into as many hands as possible. Ideally, you want the most amount of holders where no one person's holding any large percentage and it's evenly distributed, right? But how do you get to that point? That's the whole, that's the crux of the problem. So you either trust that the OA and whoever is now holding or going about to hold the bulk of the Pulse tokens is benevolent and is going to distribute those tokens over time in a fashion that is both conducive to the growth of the network and conducive to the growth of the price, or you don't.
But what do you mean distribute?
Distribute. Okay, so look at Hex. Look at Hex because it's an easier example to see. So the Hex, the way the Hex are distributed, and the reason that the OA or Richard or anybody else really doesn't give a shit to have a centralized exchange listing is because as long as all the liquidity that's provided is provided on a DEX or DEXs like Uniswap, then the token distribution model will happen in a more benevolent way to the network. Do you not get that whoever's holding those tokens, if they're providing the liquidity, if more people, if 10,000 new users come in tomorrow and they want to buy, and they want to get into Hex, they want to invest in Hex, where are they going to get the Hex from? They have to get it from somebody that's holding it. Who's holding the most of the Hex? The OA addresses, right? And those are what's providing the bulk of the liquidity. So when those people come in and they buy Hex from the liquidity pool, the person that put up the liquidity put up Hex and they get back USDC, right? So if the price only goes up and it moves up through the liquidity pool, the person who put up all that Hex loses all their Hex and all they get back is USDC, right? They don't get their Hex back, and now Hex is at a higher price. So in fact, the person providing liquidity actually gave up their Hex at a lower price, because if 10,000 users pile in right now and buy Hex with USDC, the liquidity provider is taking the other side of that trade. That's the token distribution. So over time, they either have to put more hex in at a higher price to provide more liquidity to the pool, or the pool dries up. Well, they can only do that until they run out of hex. Now, if they own 90% of the hex, they can do that for quite a while, right?
Yeah, of course. But what about the stakes coming out like in, you know, a few years where
the stakes are kind of irrelevant. I mean, the stakes are the benefit of the stake class to make the interest, right? That's the way they're earning the interest. That's for the person who doesn't understand liquidity pools and things like that. They don't want to trade. They don't want to provide liquidity. They just want to make a return on their money and go about their life. They're not into managing money. They do other things for a living, right? So they just want to know that the money that they've stored up, that they've traded their time for today, is going to be worth more tomorrow than it is today. That comes out of the inflation.
What if many people sell at the same time? I mean, if stakes matures from the staker class and
that just becomes more liquidity. So then so let's say tomorrow 10,000 stakers come in and the OA is providing 90% of the liquidity, but a whole bunch of people start dumping their money into the market. All he has to do is pull some more of his liquidity to balance that out, right? Now he doesn't have to provide the liquidity because there are sellers providing the liquidity. If there's more sellers than buyers, and the sellers are selling hex and the buyers are buying hex, and there's more sellers than buyers, what's going to happen, right? So to balance that, you just take out some of your liquidity. So now the sellers are providing the liquidity and you aren't. You're still in control of the token distribution.
And that's what I would say a healthy liquidity pool will look like.
Yeah, and you can't do that when a centralized exchange gains the bulk of the tokens. What is a centralized exchange's entire business model? It's to get you to trade in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out as much as you can so that they make the fees, because that's where they get paid. So they want this large portion of tokens to provide for speculators and traders, right? Whereas the OA has a completely different motivation. The OA is trying to distribute the tokens and gain network effect and gain token holders, gain overall token holders. But that happens over time. And what drives adoption better than price? When price goes up, everybody comes in, right? They want to buy. Right now, price is dropping. What's everybody doing? Oh my God, I don't know if I should buy this right now, right? Why? Because price is pulling back a little bit. All that means is the players have kind of been rearranged a little bit. Some people found that 54 cents, that was the price at which they became millionaires and were willing to go back into USDC or whatever, right? And so they started selling. So now the liquidity pool got heavy on the hex side, and the buyers weren't coming in and overwhelming that. So all the OA has to do right here, or whoever's providing liquidity, is just pull back on their liquidity. Just pull some of it back out of the pools. But if you don't control the pools, Coinbase and Binance do, then you can't do that. And that's what causes those massive volatility spikes, is that these centralized exchanges who are just incentivizing speculators and traders and degen gamblers to swap back and forth.
Micro trading also as well, which then gives the impression that there could be a 5-10% swing just for you to buy it. So it's heavy manipulation when you have a bigger bag from a centralized exchange.
It's way heavier. Exactly.
Yeah.
This is a way better model as long as the OA acts in a benevolent way as the centralized control during this. And this token distribution could take a decade or 2 decades. It doesn't really matter. But you watch over the years, the percentage of the OA's ownership will slowly go down as the token holder count goes up. And if you see that, then you know it's working and adoption is happening. And you'll see the same thing in Pulse. If you see that, and you don't see the OA acting in any nefarious way, which again, why would the OA act in a nefarious way? Why would the OA rug pull when they can get wealthier by doing the right thing than doing the wrong thing?
Hey, Jack, how do you see the OA getting diluted in Pulse if it's deflationary and we don't have staking?
Well, it's still the same thing. It's just that there's a limited supply or a diminishing supply of tokens, so that's going to be pushing price up, right? But the distribution is still the same thing. We clearly can see that whoever the OA is going to own the lion's share of Pulse tokens in the beginning. Right.
So,
but that's for all the rest of our benefit.
Right. In Hex, he's getting diluted by staking distributions, but in Pulse, you would think that his allocation is going to go up because it's burning off.
His value may go up, but he still has to distribute the tokens. He can't hold 90% of the tokens forever because that wouldn't be healthy. As more adoption comes, I mean, he could try and the value would go up and he would get even wealthier, but it would be more beneficial to the OA, even in the Pulse network, to distribute more of those tokens. I mean, every stock on every company that is publicly traded does essentially the same thing, right? And when you get right down to it, what are the general owners of the company end up owning? 51%, right? They just want a controlling share. Maybe the OA stops at 51% on Pulse and he controls 51%, or maybe 30% is enough to control the direction of things. I don't know.
Hey, Jack, can I ask you a question, Jack?
Sure.
Sounds like you got a really good grasp of trading in general, not just in crypto. How long you been doing this? And any background, if you don't mind? Sure.
How long have I been doing crypto? I've been doing crypto since 2009. I've been doing trading since way before that.
Okay, that's what I figured. Because yeah, you're making total sense and explaining things in perfect detail. Good on you, man.
I think the things that people don't understand is what trips them up, because then they're trying to analyze what they're doing and the moves they're making based on the wrong information instead of the right information. In crypto, what matters more than anything to understand really is, are you dealing with a coin or a token? And if you're dealing with the token, is it mutable or immutable? And then what's the token distribution model? If you understand those things, you have a better grasp of most of these projects than most people do, or I should say most of these investments, and why you should invest or not invest in a particular token or coin. The coins tend to do better than the tokens. Say again?
Can you repeat those three things to understand that can give us a
The difference between a coin and a token. A coin is a native asset on a blockchain, right? So like you have BNB is the native asset on Binance chain, and then you can have a token, which could be like Link is an ERC20 token on the Ethereum network, right? So a token is always derived by a smart contract. But a coin is the native asset of a blockchain or a network. So like Bitcoin is a coin, Ethereum is a coin. It's not an ERC20. That's why if you want to trade on a smart contract, you have to swap your ETH for WETH, because wrapped ETH is an ERC20 token. So you're depositing your coins in a smart contract and you're getting back a synthetic of that coin, which is an ERC20 token. And so now you can trade on a decentralized exchange like 1inch because it's a token against a token, right? So the difference between a coin and a token. The second thing is the difference between an immutable and a mutable token. So I'll just use two examples of what I talked about earlier. Link is a mutable token. The team holds admin keys. It's a good token, and I don't think that the team is going to do anything nefarious with it, but they can. You have to be aware that they can. They could literally go into the smart contract, and change your balance or delete your address, and suddenly your address would just be void of the tokens that you thought you were holding in your address. So you think because you see those tokens in your address, just like people think that their tokens are literally on a hardware wallet, you know, they're not. Just because you see them with a hardware wallet or you sign the transactions with a hardware wallet doesn't mean your tokens are there. Your tokens are either on a blockchain or they're in a smart contract on a blockchain. So your coins are on a blockchain, your tokens are in a smart contract on a blockchain. And tokens can be either mutable or immutable. So Hex, one of its stellar shining points is that it's absolutely 100% unequivocally immutable. Nobody can ever change it. Nobody can ever go in there and change your balances. Nobody can ever delete your address from it. If you see those tokens in your address, they're in there until you either get hacked by losing your private keys or seeds, or you choose to move them. But nobody else has got the power to do it but you. And
can you
furthermore,
yeah,
you're the only one that has the ability to mint them or burn them. So you can burn them to obtain T-shares by staking, or you can mint them by end staking and burning your T-shares to get your tokens back. But you're the only one that can do that. So all the power is in your hands. You're just interacting with an immutable contract. So that's the difference between mutable and immutable contract. And then the token distribution model is the third thing. And the token distribution model is important because there are hundreds of different ways that people have tried to distribute tokens, from mining rewards to airdrops to ICOs to IDOs to, you know, like, I mean, the list is just almost endless, right? And so all these new things are just new variations of token distribution models. So when you come into a new project and they're touting all of their different features or their attributes, you know, think of it like this, that all these things is programmable money with various different attributes. So which money you want should depend upon which attributes you're looking for, and which attributes you're looking for should depend upon what outcome are you hoping to achieve by holding this token or this coin, right? This asset. Because depending upon what you're trying to achieve, you should be looking for specific attributes in the programmable money that you're choosing. Hex is really good for people who, I mean, short of, like I said, short of putting something like Bitcoin in a time lock, you really can't outperform Hex's attributes for retaining and growing your stored time over time. Nobody's done it better yet. Are there drawbacks? Yeah, you kind of have to trust that the OA is going to continue to be benevolent. But name me one thing that incentivizes the OA to be nefarious over benevolent. I can't think of anything.
When you talk about these admin keys, is it like there is admin keys, it's just thrown away, or can you look at the contracts and say it's
no? You can literally see. You can look in the contract and see if the admin keys were burned. So the token contract is just an address, just like your address is an address, right? Where you hold your coins as your account, and a token contract has an address the same way. And the way they're created, they can be created where the contract, when it's, how do I say it? When the contract is launched.
The contract creator.
Okay,
yes.
I understand. So
when the contract is launched, the contract itself can burn the admin keys as a part of the launch, like Hex did. So you can go in there and see that nobody ever saw the keys to that address.
So it's
they were burned.
Basically. Can't hack it.
Yeah, you can't. Nobody could get it. Nobody could get into
I was wondering if you seem to have a lot of good info on this, and you said you've been in crypto since 2009. So, with that experience, how do you see what do you think is going to happen to Pulse moving forward? I mean,
I think Pulse will do really, really well because it's an EVM, but they're doing well. We don't know exactly all of what they're doing yet. I mean, we know some of what's been revealed, like there's going to be 33 validators. We know it's going to be proof of stake. We know that it's going to be deflationary, that tokens are going to get burned. We know that the fees are the only thing that the validators are going to get paid off because there's no inflation. So we know a lot of things, but we don't know everything yet. But based on the fact that Richard Hart is the one that is kind of behind the creation of it, he has an unbelievable grasp of all these different projects in crypto over the years and what makes them work and what doesn't make them work and why. Like, he knows, like, he has a far better understanding of it than I do, like on a really detailed code level. He understands why these things function the way they do and why they don't. And so typically everything he's created, he's looked at what's worked and what hasn't and why, and he's adopted the parts of the things that have already been created that worked and integrated them into revised versions of doing the things that didn't work. And
so
so
what about
I have no reason to believe he's not going to do the same thing on Pulse.
so
But
what
that's
you
what he's
take
doing.
on these airdrops, ERC20s? That's never been done before. What's your take on that approach?
Well, he's just copying over all of the contracts, right? So if Link's contract gets copied over, the Link token contract gets copied over, the team that holds the keys to the Link contract on Ethereum will now hold the keys to the contract on Pulse. So what happens with that contract is completely up to the people who hold the keys. Some contracts don't have any keys. Those get copied over. They're just kind of, I don't know what I said, never been done before. So a lot of things we don't know how it's going to work. Some things are going to become better versions of the old thing, and some things are going to just get killed instantly, and other things will replace them. I don't know. I'm just kind of stoked about the fact that it's just going to be a new EVM network with hopefully way better thought out structure.
Which
I can
brings
tell
up
you that if you watched what Binance did when, from the beginning of Binance at the ICO, you bought those tokens for like, I want to say it was 85 cents, but I think they were cheaper than that. But for every $1,000 you bought back in July of 2017, it became worth $700,000 at the top, and that was after they launched their version of the EVM. So their version of the EVM was BSC, right? And that's a two-chain system because they still have their main chain, and it integrates with the EVM. Others are doing it different. Pulse is a separate chain all of itself, right? But it has its native token, Pulse. So I think as far as value goes, you can see that the Ethereum network can't handle the growth, right? It can't scale to the growth. First it's CryptoKitties, it breaks. Then it's DeFi and it breaks, right? And now it's NFTs and it's breaking again. And so they can't handle the network effect of adoption that wants to build using Solidity smart contracts. So these EVMs are totally necessary. They're basically just an extended network that'll operate the exact same contracts in similar ways, but that can handle more scale. So that's why you see the growth of things like Solana and Luna and Rune and BSC. I mean, BSC exploded when they put out the Binance token exploded, I should say, when they put out the BSC network. And now they had all those different features added in for incentives to get you to use the network. that are on Pancake Swap, right? Like the syrup pools and all those things. So if Richard does what he says he's going to do and forks over the Pancake Swap, which by the way, Lydia has already done on Avalanche, and that's a similar thing. So Avalanche could be seen as Pulse, just, you know, way more clunky, and Lydia copied over the Pancake Swap, the whole functions of it over onto the Avalanche network. He's going to do the same thing. That will get adoption. Now, you know, which of the features is he going to put in there? Because the syrup pools are nothing more than token distribution models, right? So like if he puts the syrup pools up there, so everything, let's say everything is stake Pulse and earn X, right? Then X can be anything. So let's say an Oracle project moves over onto Pulse, similar to Band or Link, and they want to distribute their new tokens partially through to the user base. So they say, well, Pulse has a good solid user base. It's a lot of the Hexicans and a lot of the sacrificers. So these are people who are willing to give up money to gain something. These are people who are actively involved in the network. So we want them people to be holding our tokens. We want to distribute a percentage of our tokens to those people. We can use a syrup pool type pool where you stake Pulse to earn Link, or stake Pulse to earn Band, or whatever they call it, you know. And now they're distributing their tokens to the people who stake the Pulse. But by you staking the Pulse, because that pool's there, you're now also securing the Pulse network, because the more Pulse that are locked up, the less that can be sold, the less that are available, and the more secure the network is. That's the whole point of proof of stake, right?